Kadamo omo ala ngaringa tira dong hiringi. Kadamo omo le malungi litasils tia hearing ar litasils a confirmation hearing ra Senate Committee ra Ways and Means and Financial Matters el gire la Senate resolution number 11-10 tel resolution amo confirm ra appointment ra Mr. Kaleb Udui Jr. el mo Minister of Finance. Ma awira domo le di podung telte ale the welcome ra Mr. Kaleb Udui Jr. Maaserngi Mrs. Kaleb Udui Jr. ma angalgel klols al ngaktiang al lupanggel mang ako te kurang sulem Mr. Udui ra akangir ka ra appointment ra president yang ngaktel hearing al talyal sils president ta Senate tangkol Senator Hocons Paules, Vice President ta Senate Senator Karay Mariur, ma floor leader ng Senate Senator Cecily Aldabel, tinakal nga tiyang Senator Rumi Sangabaw, Senator Dr. Stevenson Cuarte, ma Senator Andrew Tabalwal, tinakal nga tiyang Senator Mason Ngirabangal Whips, Senator TJ Ramangasaw, ma Senator Sungino, ma Senator Raitis Aitaya, ma Vice Chairman na Committee na Ways and Means Senate at ang Senator Sio Isaal. Ay mal nga sule malnuste mertel confirmation hearing ilal itasils ma 3 o'clock sulang al milital giban mangila al malarinya confirmation hearing ra amo minister NPIIC ma ni malmare nga sule mangila era ado mo le etik kung Michael Mascaw mam tunga opening statement tarakawe poto mo ulat tal hearing sulang.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senators. Congratulations on those of you on your re-election, and for those new senators who are, I believe, all in this room today. So it's an honor to be before you. I am glad I have this opportunity to come to this hearing and to share with you some of the thoughts on the ministry and to address any concerns you may have about my appointment. I'm privileged to have been appointed for this very important position. As you know, Palau's future in the near term will require a lot of work in getting money to fund the budget and to assist the economy get back on its feet, and those people who are unemployed now who need to transition back to the workforce. So I think there's a lot of challenges for the ministry and for myself, but I think the President's belief in what I can do and how he wants it done, I'm willing to undertake that role for him and this administration and for the country. I think it's our obligation. So I appreciate your questions that you will have for me today, and I hope I can answer them adequately so we can move forward with the work that needs to be done, some of which I am already working on. We have a tax reform committee meeting at 3 o'clock, and I told them go ahead without me. And we hope to be working with you soon on that project. I know that you've already introduced the bill, and we would like to assist in the process of getting a bill put together that serves our needs for now and the future. So I appreciate that, and welcome any questions you may have. Thank you, Chairman.
Sulang Kaleb ay Aw era to mo lek ti swakal ti mo o oy witel babil nga la president surang la whips junior girel appointment tarkaw. Okmula siyang mo yung lakar o katera el Mr. Udui Orior ra buhay ma private sector ra blue belaw. Mga ikay kita experience ringi ma klamdangi ringi ra finance ma tuor ringi ra management skills akmal mo sab el ngosuwi ra blue belaw. Mo sab el ngi akaltmok el monex el Minister of Finance. Nga mangkal Mr. Uduya at tilob ra University of Guam, loba nga Bachelor of Business Administration degree ngi. Edire kal ngi lo Master of Business Administration degree ngi ra University of Hawaii. Ma Mr. Uduya lilutal merbelaw, emlo reo ra Chief ra Division ra Budget and Management ra Ministry ra Administration. Sa gidal time engok na Ministry ra Administration mang seral nga tayo posisyon ya Mr. Udu ya ataramle mga tmok sel financial availability analysis document sel FAA el gidabal all malay ringi el girela budget formulation process Mr. Udu ya dire kamlo all nga sel mga tmok sel budget and financial system mga tmok lagi regulation al girel mga Mr. Uduya Amiral Rakabalment or sira 1999 el mlo Oreo ra Bank of Hawaii el mle Business Banking Officer ra Bank of Hawaii mlo nga ra sel loan portfolio ra commercial sector ra bank sira 2004 ya Mr. Udui kuklilutan mo ol nga si Rabuay, ilmlo Presidente ra National Development Bank. Mang segital ngarse, hindi ra kal member FIC board, imlo receiver ra Pacific Savings Bank, seral bol nga niya problem ra segital bank. Ikal last 5 years, ngkal Mr. Udui amla policy advisor ra president ra mga saw lolo nga saw ra president ra yel ko ra policy decisions algira la ikakita le budget ma other economic issues face niya belaw mang this wakal mo all tagay gidal qualifications ra Mr. Udui yak matangalil Mr. Udui el mal matatal nga ra banking sector de kalbel also nga nga economic study ra blur bela weng ya tara contributing member ay gidel lomasubal basang wangarang gay sa erkit nga ra umil pala sil dortirak leng mo sa edal gutmokla gutmaklia agay sa erkit ma tingul mo sa igid markong ipay ngawlaw lang Mr. Senators marang niya karir mo sa loger Mr. Udui mang algirel tel appointment taringi ama akot ya Senator is alam mo o gira karir
sulang chairman chair lady nga ka di mo mre akot ten swakal congratulate ra Mr. Udui ra appoint ringi by President Sulang Wills Jr. Ako marang ulak mo sa mo congratulate ringi ako mas ringi tutokol war baby ra adal ng okle sa senator at yal iring tutol mi relat no to the school din makal seminary kira outside he decided to come home early and make palaw their home and contribute in more development we can see some of these new senators relal no to matalol bi dong ok to mi adal nga yor parliament rebelaw ma private sector different from early 80s, man I research tema multopra skule milirik mamoter te boruba ke medemay. Ito mesra ulo de la senete toptogol na representa senator sa alisegi del mode Mr. Udui klatter gide la sen klabul gulat pa skule edlut mer abluat. We need to be a part of nation building. So congratulations on that, and congratulations for your nomination. I have akna lemeng sa muy waigel in grim aigel gerli lgorgau all the questions that were sent to you by the committee, and every time I understand them. Aktimo swakal laska 3 questions, timo swakal mau de semel girel. Some of these questions have lagu mesir del answer del questionnaire il gorgau. And in dimre de makupak to spell ang 5 minutes. Magot is if maswakal mum dang li ngaraw to semel as nominated for this position. If you are confirmed to be Minister of Finance, ikaw yamo frontliner to President Whips Jr. Ratora Finance government. Ito sa ministry, ito ka biro nga reungil. Mga ako to gari kalagawak mula sing kumitangay, and you know for sure sa kita, the past few years have got into debt. The plan sa ADB, plan sa Bank of Taiwan, and last time I saw the report, we're over $90 million in debt. Recently, we got 10 million ang process for PPUC, direct pension. In your view, have we reached our maximum ability to borrow, or we still can go ahead and borrow? Sakal mamdali siya igit, the same as confirmer ko ang Minister of Finance, yung Turokli President, talabolo spell, mamaling auto, and he's going to come to you and ask you, Mr. Minister, mga audiswer, akali kalagor ka, simply one, first question, have you reached our debt limitation? What's your opinion or view on that?
Thank you, Vice Chairman. It's a very important question, and one of the main challenges for the Ministry of Finance and the Republic. We have, until now, been able to borrow from our multilateral partners like the Asian Development Bank at concessionary rates. One of the problems with being a successful country and increasing our GDP per capita, which is how countries are usually measured in terms of whether or not they can get cheap financing. We've been successful in raising our incomes and passing that threshold for them. So it's not just about borrowing, but borrowing at more expensive prices. And that is a concern. So, but it is taking the good with the bad. Because we are a more prosperous country, we should be able to generate our own money to fund our own projects, as well as to borrow at more money at even if it's at more expensive prices. So if we look around the world and we look at how much other countries are borrowing, we're still not in a dangerous position. And we can say that there are times when you have to borrow, like what we are doing now for emergency purposes, and we are receiving a lot of assistance to make sure that we can pay that money back. So that is one of the initiatives that the Ministry of Finance will be working on, is tax reform, fiscal responsibility, debt sustainability. So we can be assured that going forward, as we borrow more money, we are able to repay that money back. So that is, I guess, a way to say that we're still okay in terms of how much we've borrowed so far. We're also looking at different kind of projects to raise money. So it started in the last administration. We started 2 PPP projects, the airport project and the renewable energy project. You're only able to do that when you're at a higher level of economy and financial capacity, so you can entertain those kind of projects. So we don't need to borrow as much. But it's only because we've gotten to that point where we're more sophisticated and can entertain these other kind of projects. So again, the Asian Development Bank loan involves assistance on working on our PPP system so that we can look at this as another funding source to grow our government, our economy, and to provide services to the people. So I believe we're at this point, we're still monitoring how much we're borrowing. We're borrowing with a plan to repay, and we're getting a lot of assistance to make sure that we repay and improve our economy at the same time. So I guess a long answer to your question, I think we're okay, and the debt ceiling is still far off, but it will put some strains on our finances when we have to start paying these loans back. So something to think about in the future. But for now, the main concern is making sure our economy, we still have an economy that we can bring back, we can recover, and then grow from that point. Yes.
Thank you for a good answer. Chair Lady, I have two more items directly sa ask you ngi hindi sugo mga nga member mitil so algora nga akari tayo hindi ko to question na nga while we edit elbong yalla kulumon.
Ngarinya senator ngarinya karirel kirela debt ceiling ma borrowing capacity rablo belaw. Albong senator Agitaya and then senator Mangasaw.
Sorry, Chair. Towards the end of last year, arungo ako ne position marungo atokol mildung na sila Senate, marego sa Senate, akmul was Kaleb la bora debt ceiling. Si ele Chair tilgibel mgora enlighten nga kama. Mgora tilgibel awanaya tel statement ra nominal merawla tulungit ra mo sem ngusuga karsigi.
Kapag Kaleb come explain na debt ceiling.
Sorry if I'm using terms that I are not commonly used, but the debt ceiling that we're referring to is the amount of debt that you can safely take on, whether it's a person or a business or the government. There is a point where borrowing becomes detrimental to your financial health. So that's the way I'm referring to the term debt ceiling. For instance, I mentioned other countries. Some countries have like multiples of their economy. Our GDP is around 200 million. Let's say a debt ceiling could be 100% or 200 million. Debt ceiling could also be twice the amount, so 400 million. But it's something that you can target that you can basically it's what you can afford to take without not being able to repay your loan. So that's your debt ceiling. So for Palau, I think we are still okay. One of the challenges with debt ceiling for us is because we have no economy. So like I said, our GDP is usually around 200. Because we have no tourists, our GDP went down. So when you compare the loans to how much our GDP is lower and our debt ceiling will be higher. So we need to build our economy back to recover it so that the amount of borrowing we have is proportional to our GDP. I hope I didn't confuse anybody with that, but that's essentially the debt ceiling that we're referring to. It'll be different for different countries, different businesses, different people.
Namongil Senator Agitaya. Abang Senator Mangasaw.
Before I get to my question, I guess maybe you can just elaborate more on his question. I think he was referring to the stress level, whether his understanding was previously they said that we're reaching our tipping point where we cannot encumber more debt. So he was confused as to, you're saying that we can comfortably say that we can still incur more debt, but then his understanding is that no, we should minimize or work towards lower debt, taking on lower debts.
Yes, thank you for that, Senator. We are borrowing at a higher level than we've ever borrowed before. We are getting this borrowing at the low interest rate, so it also helps us to borrow that amount. But if we don't do anything else, we won't be able to borrow more. So that's why I'm mentioning the Asian Development Bank and these reforms like tax reform and debt sustainability analysis and these other programs that they're willing to help us with technical assistance. So if we change our ability to generate more money, that raises the debt ceiling for us to be able to borrow more. Yeah. So that's what I meant. The debt ceiling depends on how much your income you're making, how much assets you have, and we're in a bad time. Our economy is down, so everything will be magnified. The debt ceiling will look worse because we're not at our normal self. So first thing we need to do is bring up our GDP back up, and it'll make the debt ceiling look smaller to us. Yeah. So I hope that explains it further.
Ask a question.
Oy, ask a question.
Mr. Kaleb, Mr. Udui, kamatingi kamil sadra ADB may galbe lending institutions tiramal misaulo ng sergit. Questioner nga kalikurkar alsil sa wasi IMF, International Monetary Fund, Marwa World Bank, direct kalmad klo although del sebe edel access. Ding tablo all site telwasi because belaw nga high income level compared to our Vanuatu ma galbebira blura Pacific sen labor nga kora natural disaster mga labo ongitra Vanuatu et mastrira millions and millions of dollars gidam la member IMF na member World Bank yet tendal edel access ay gidel resources la SBM lomdas lo ase ngariate al SBM kora awase due to our remoteness, due to our susceptibility to all this climate change mangrangklen SBM mo access ay kay gidel direct al gukmo lang sir gidel buffer ay kay gidel kora unexpected tora climate change abebira tora natural disaster say gidel.
Thank you, Senator, for the question. There are other programs that we have been using from like the Asian Development Bank, like the COVID relief money that we use, I believe, in conjunction with the CROSS Act. That is a special program for this kind of disruption in our economy. It's sort of unprecedented, this pandemic that we're experiencing. So they do have a program for that we were able to use. And they're still developing those kind of programs. So when they're developed, then we can avail of them. My understanding, having worked with the Asian Development Bank, IMF, and World Bank, is that right now they all assist us. I remember a consultant coming down to look at a new port site for Palau shipping. I remember the IMF coming down, like right now they're assisting us with our tax reform. They send consultants for technical assistance and in tax, and we will be relying on them heavily to provide assistance for us going forward. But generally, I believe that they often refer to Asian Development Bank as our regional entity. So they'll often work through them. They all work together, but often they'll pick somebody to lead the assistance. So while we do receive a lot of attention from the Asian Development Bank, we don't forget about the others. They have sometimes unique programs for us, and often they're developed as part of whatever's happening at the time, like Y2K. We receive money from the World Bank for Y2K, a special program to deal with that issue. IMF is usually reserved for financial matters like helping our banking supervision. We receive a lot of assistance from them, a lot of training through their program in Singapore for anti-money laundering or how to regulate banks. Now we expect that they'll be supporting us very heavily on the matter of cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. So we still do receive a lot from them, but it may depend on what issue it is that we get a different kind of assistance. Yes. Thank you.
President Senate.
Malungil odo sungol merga Kaleb Junior nung blatat siringi senator mga saw mga lana an sirabe bilma di halik klutun malmo o askar gawe klutun malmo ska dip priskama dip an sire hali dik telik to ram rigel ang amal mo ngil understand ngi al chebe pogod ng lil tor vela wadilu. Now that Palau is not eligible for many grant assistance due to its classification as high-income country, and given that borrowing money may place more burden on the people of Palau, what are measures beside loan would you propose as a Minister of Finance to access funding for budget support?
Thank you, Mr. President. To me, I think the most responsible thing is to have a very strong economy that can give us the taxes to fund the government and infrastructure development that we need. So I really believe in our new president's policy of trying to remove roadblocks and provide support to local business to grow. I think that's ultimately where we want to be in terms of funding public expenditure. But the other program that has started already is the PPP, where government will partner with the private sector to fund a lot of these projects that we would like to see. Roads, new building, development in Babodab, housing. I think there's a lot of opportunity for the private sector to partner with government, and we use private sector money to develop Palau and a lot of this infrastructure that we're asking for. Of course, there are other types of business and activities that we can bring in, and new industries to Palau. I don't want to mention, some of them are very controversial, but for instance, let's say primary industries, farming, fishing. Whenever we reduce what we import, we get more money in the country that we can use to fund the development. So yes, it is more difficult now to get money, especially from loans, because we have to borrow at higher interest rates. But I think we are still able to borrow. We have very good friends in, let's say, Taiwan, who are continuously funding a lot of our projects through grants. Maybe that's also, we need to ask our countries to give us more grants. The United States is showing more interest in our country for defense purposes. That's another way we can bring in some more money to our country. Then, of course, using some borrowing at not so low interest rates for productive projects that generate money, like PUC. It's a business that belongs to government. They can borrow money because they can pay it back, not from general taxpayer funds, but from their fees that they get from generating power, for example.
Thank you. Senator Isal will continue.
I have two
his,
more, and this
questions.
is all in general, and then you just mentioned United States, so that's going to lead me to my next question. Toward the end of the Masao administration, of course, U.S. President Trump, there was a push for a negotiation of the compact which will expire in 2024. We do not know what's this new U.S. administration position on the reviewing of the compact. I haven't heard anything from Transition Committee or from this President, Surang Luis Jr., about what's its view on the early negotiation of the compact, which will expire in 2024. But that's just one of a sort of we're facing a negotiation anyway for the next package, funding package. So my question to you, what's your view if President Wills Jr. came a time that we start talking about the compact negotiation for economic assistance, and President Wills Jr. asked you, and you're a minister, so you ask Minister Kaleb, Udui, give me the number that we should ask US as the total package for the new compact funding. What will be the figure you would tell President Wills Jr., and what are some of the major projects that the money will be for?
Thank you, Senator, for a very difficult question. I've had a few discussions with the president and very basic questions, and I have not been following the negotiations with the U.S., so I don't have much detail on what they've been talking about. But from what I know, I believe there is an opportunity for Palau to receive additional money for the trust fund. And I believe because of the U.S. Interest in Palau for defense purposes, there's also additional money that could be brought in for that purpose. And of course, there's other programs that the U.S. may support us with. I think we don't always remember that the U.S. is our largest donor, and they fund certain things that are of high priority to them. And I'm referring to Ministry of Education and Ministry of Health. The COVID vaccine, we do receive a lot of assistance from the United States, but it's very targeted towards things that they're very interested in. So some of these funding, I think we cannot really quantify, because money for education, money for health and human services, they don't give us the number, they just give us the program. And it can go up and down depending on how much we ask for. And I think the trick is to make sure that we keep getting those funding. It's worth a lot to us in the long term. I think your question is more on how much money we can get for our own pocket. I think the president, when we start the negotiation with his new negotiating team, will have to look at that. And at this time, I think what we should be asking for is trust fund money. It's the easiest argument for us to make. Further development of our infrastructure. And I don't know if you've seen the most recent list of all the CIPs for Palau, but there's a substantial amount on that list. Any amount of money against that list would be very helpful to Palau. And I think we have a more chance of getting that kind of money for infrastructure because it's something that's already under the compact. And for other special programs that we may ask for, money for acquiring land, which is what they had given us in the original compact, we could possibly ask for more money in that sense. But to give you a number would be very difficult without looking at the whole negotiation and what we're going to put together.
Thank you. I thought you had a crystal ball that you were looking at.
I wish
Anyway,
I did.
it's the last question, and then directly go to the general questions. 2 days ago, the Senate passed the first tax reform bill in the history of the Republic of Palau since 1981. I know, and I've seen on your answer to the questions that were sent to you, and I know the fact that you worked in the finance department for a while, and that you were the first attempt for the VAT tax, you were involved in that. I had meeting with you on that because I was the member of the House already. What's your viewpoint on this tax reform? Give us about 3 minutes position on this, and something that I and the rest of the members of the House Senate would take into consideration as we deliberate on this tax reform that has been passed on the first reading at the Senate.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. This is a major policy change for the government to undertake tax reform. I think we all have to work together to make sure we get the best tax system for our country. Our tax system is very outdated. I think they said it's at least 50 years old, and it worked in a very different economy. I remember when I first started with the budget office, I think it was around 11 million was our budget, very, very small. Now we're talking about $100 million budget. The businesses that we have here are very different from what we had back then. So the times have changed, and I think it's time that we look at reform to fit the kind of businesses that we have and to not get in the way of business. And I say that because the requirements back then for a mom and pop store, when we talk to some of the older people, and they talk about buying cigarettes for like 10 cents or something like that. Very different economy from what we have now, and different policies that we have now, where we have a very high excise tax on alcohol and tobacco. So we can benefit from reform, and I think this is a good time, not only for developing our economy further, but also to address these loans that we've been taking out. So this is one of the ways that we're going to be able to manage our debt and increase our debt ceiling if we choose to borrow additional funds. So this tax reform is very important, and in discussions with one of the consultants, he reminded me that what we are trying to do in this reform, or what we should try to do, is modernize our tax system. And I agree with him that some of these reforms will be very welcome to business. For instance, the business profits tax, basically paying taxes on your net income rather than your sales, will really help businesses grow. Part of that particular tax reform involves if you lose money in that year, you can take that loss and bring it to the next year, so you get a break in paying taxes, so you can grow your business, recover more quickly. So I think this is very important for our country, and I think we have many attempts at this throughout the years, starting with the first IMF consultancy, which was on tax reform when we became an independent country and a member of the IMF. So I think it's a good time to start it now. We've reviewed it so many times, and now with businesses being so weak, this would be a very good time to help them recover by using this tool to reform our tax policy.
Thank you, Mr. Udui, and I use the
Sulang Senator is Alarigel Karil. Senator Sampaw.
Chair, sulang ra ti al il tasil se Mr. Udui. Akariga amal dito ti mo ogeren hopefully. Well, the other game are going ask one time. Predecessor ka Minister Sadang he talked about challenge issue tax evasion, particularly agal magagarel retail stores. So I want to know kasi nga what can we do? Talgib good makli sa gidal kukura issue maybe they know how to avoid the taxes. So if there's something that you can do within Ministry of Finance to address that. And my second question is more of a second grige chair masaudra issue ngariya malakoy baby expert malako kasi one of the thing about selsum gadalo na although the ADB may gagi del baby rabang, they have a tendency mo dictate tapala sira balu. And tiya ngariya example ngil, and I wanna al ngarabu kol blue covenant al murablu legal mal mabu blue Africa al kumurtir kasi you need to clean your water matamas triralo al clean aral, and then emergo kumurtir sa now you have to pay for the water. Tiragal ada talbalu abay kasi at least temle dood andig dim lagi maharaw elagam lak murgamam magi maharaw hindi gal sa mal afford ringi. And so I think so kal gora get your view sel gukul the swimmer tiang kasi tiang is that true? Alo mga rasa elgut maklil al talgib al puspa kal sukum kadol ngit tanges undin dia kada puspa kal kasi kada magara and dia kala although humra kasi some of the recommendations are good for Palau, I just don't feel kasi hindi kal self perception kasi they're tirga ola blay kalo maski del force gid al mo so gigita di tulgari ke chair kam sara te ala
Sala Minister Sangpa. Senator Sangpa. Kapang
Thank you, Senator. On the first question of tax evasion, I think every country experiences this, and I think our country has some challenges with people evading tax. I think it's very logical, reasonable to avoid having to pay more taxes. That way you keep more in your pocket. But the evasion is intentional, willful non-payment of what you're supposed to pay by law. And I think there are several things we can do to address that. Hopefully, in the reform, there will be a chance to address evasion. I remember Senator Isal reminds us of the first tax reform, and we were doing at the time some public outreach. And I remember having a meeting at the PCC after the education on what we were proposing. The lady came up to me, a Filipina lady, and said, "You know, it's going to be very hard for us to pay the tax because right now we're all front business. So if you make us pay under one company, it's hard because we're not the same people. We cannot show each other what we're what we're making. So a simple reform like that can make a difference. The other thing is to make sure our tax people are trained and incentivized to go out there and make sure compliance is very high with our laws. One quick solution will be to make sure that we have regulations. I don't think our tax office has detailed enough regulations to help businesses comply. So sometimes it's not their intention, but they don't comply with our tax law because there's no guidance to help them make sure that they pay their taxes on time and in the right amounts and in the right ways. So I think very quickly we can implement those kind of programs without any change in law. Second question. I think it's always a challenge if you're going to borrow money that those people, because it's their money, can tell you what they want, whether it's right or wrong. But I think it's more important that we, especially with these kind of institutions like the World Bank and ADB, they don't necessarily want us to fail, but sometimes it's easier for them to just say what everybody else does. So we need to make sure that we tell them what will work here in Palau and how we can get to the world standard, but not do it overnight so it causes disruption in our market or in our communities. So that's something I think that we have to be very careful about. And from my experience in working with on these loans, we've been pretty good at representing our requirements and how it is in Palau for us, and that usually comes out in our favor. But it's up to us to make sure that we do our job and tell them what we can handle and what can work and what cannot work. I think it still happens today, but it's something that we have to keep working on, or change the person who we're borrowing from, or change how much we're asking for, or mix and match to get the best deal that fits our needs and not influence us in the wrong direction. Yes, thank you.
Sulang Mr. Udui. Aula lamura Senate President Paules.
Mousubes Senator Quartegal Griga medel ta randik timok mo bebile aliga uriulak mo. Ako talgere geleba saying, what would you do as a Minister of Finance to make sure that we receive the budget on time and that information is available when we require?
Thank you, Mr. President. It's a very good question. And a question I was a bit surprised with when I saw it on the questionnaire. So my understanding is the budget comes in on time, but I'm not responsible for it, so I'm not sure if it has been. So yes, you need to get the budget earlier, the better. But I think it's also important that you have the information already. So when you get the budget request, it's easy to interpret. So I know finance has had some challenges with the financial system, and they just implemented the new financial system. So this is a very modern system, and you're able to give access to people who have who are involved in government. So what I'm hoping is that the OEK will have access to the MUNIS system, the accounting system at the Treasury. So if you have a question, you can look it up yourself. That's the easiest, I think, way to help the policymakers get the information you need to make your decisions. And then when you get the budget statement, you already know why they're asking for what they're asking for. But to get it done on time, we need to train the offices. Make sure that each of them has somebody who is trained to help the rest of the ministry to submit their budgets and submit it on time and submit it in a way that we can approve. Because sometimes they don't understand when you say performance budgeting, they don't know what you mean by an output, what you mean by an outcome, what's an input, what is your work designed as, which workflow are you talking about. So yeah, I think we have to help people more in the ministries to make sure they understand what they're being asked to do and make it easy for them to submit something so we can give it to Congress to look at quickly and make a decision quickly. Yes. I hope that answers your question, Senator.
Kangilu siya lang ni Chairman. Ilang di soal mo touch cross acte, makti agera say with limited resource, what is the best way to improve the cross act to minimize the funds used to make sure that relief is provided to the public?
Thank you, Senator. Very important question for our economy and probably something a lot of people in the public are concerned with. Yes. I believe the previous bill on Cross Act was not acted upon so that the new Congress could act upon it. And I think it was a good idea to defer it so we can find out what the United States is going to do. So at this point, I'm a member of the WIA, and we had a meeting today, and we were discussing this, and they said the money is available until March. I think we have to also wait for the U.S. to decide what they're going to do before we can know if we're going to get more money. But the Cross Act and the CARES Act from the United States, we were using them together. So now that we don't have as much money on the CARES Act, the Cross Act becomes more important. So we need to make sure that people still get support before we open the economy and they can go back to work. And I think we should try to do that earlier. One of the discussions we had in the WIA meeting is that people haven't been working for a while now. So maybe they're not ready to go back to work, and they'd rather stay at home and continue to get money. So it's going to be a challenge for us, and we need to approach this in a way with the support of Cross Act and other agencies that are involved in this kind of work. For instance, the President's new ministry on human resources would be very useful in this regard to help organize the workforce to make sure we're ready to start working when we can. And hopefully there is money to support people till we get to that point. So that's some thoughts I have. I'm not involved in the Cross Act discussions under this President.
May sendi opo minister, I think that's the first thing you're going to face.
Yes.
Ngariak medal darta madarangil adar belor el al momreglo aurora endre el almanda. Se ako to klol concern mamre el al time o se kadam gara sol bringira. Even au era endra mande ngrasbedel assurance el street trigal adal wase continue aurora legimo o passertel cross actel siyang gimala bang ringir el al time.
Okay.
E mo subesa igadir gam ngaring dim ka saygung self procurement you mentioned in your response to the questionnaire that our procurement law is outdated. Ya otru lolbira lulaw amle amendra procurement ngia alla al RPPL 10-26. What other changes do you see in the procurement law that needs to be updated to ensure efficiency in government services?
Thank you, Senator. So this is one of the programs that we are working on right now. Our current Procurement Act, and I'm aware that we did update it a few years ago, or last administration. This Procurement Act doesn't allow a system to do PPP, public-private partnership. to do public-private partnership, there are different kind of activities that you do in procurement, and those are not supported under our existing law. So to update it to allow for these kind of projects, we need to add some new legislation, create new regulations, and new offices to help us, do more projects with the private sector. The Republic and many other small countries receive a lot of project proposals from people. We didn't ask for it, but they ask us to entertain. This will give us a way to deal with it in a safe way for the public and make sure we can take on some of these projects and improve our economy or our services to the people. That's not possible in our current system because it doesn't provide those mechanisms for review of projects. At the same time, we can initiate the PPP, the public-private partnership, but there needs to be a way for us to put that out in our system and then evaluate what comes in and start a project for whatever we're interested in doing, infrastructure or some kind of service like a poultry farm or those kind of things. It's like what I'm referring to when I say we need some additional reforms in our procurement system. But it's something we're working on now.
Sulat Chairman ngari amde lendi halek pastrat elirar bevil ma po global mo. Kamo
Sulang Presidenta Senate. Okay. Alalutal mga Senator Isal.
Seguir el lacra provision of current procurement law. Seguir al amleu mumlunya issued til airport project because we did not go through procurement process tiagir paulam lunya abtol question al ngul olbir sel time la singram dia ka bidi gram dia ka gram nimsual clear sing because of the limited dimnak ngara procurement law this administration was able to do the PPE with the airport without going through the process. Mula wala, because there are many questions asked, people wondering why.
Sulang Senator Isalia, wala lamora Senator Aldabel.
Sula, Chairperson, malungil afternoon, Kaleb. Kaleb, you and I have worked together on a number of occasions, and more recently, we worked together for the last administration. Osubes, I'm being told to speak Palawan, so. Kaleb, hindi ka mal question nga kalgira la qualification nga mortial mal cloud to telel position ra Complement Ministry of Finance. Akti di way Senate President malbato ka question nga kandik mo sure ba most ngiling mostly technical, and I'm hoping na se sugmo mo get confirmed, and then there will be an opportunity to sit down with you go over agigidul ko ra baby questions. But only at this time in sokal ko ra di yung maudasyo malgira lagagi del tabalong malabang kaldel to I think most elgo help nga kal hopefully tigal members sa Senate to make their consideration or tial appointment ram. Ako te on the area of banking, ginamdang liya our banking industry ilang amal di ultuy regel di 3 or 4 FDIC banks. Egana mirigida ultuy ra tokol bloting la business involve foreign investments ngara within our region, Asia and Pacific region. Which means yel tletela financial transactions will require a transaction ra banks nga ra Siabal, ma ra Taiwan, ma Sina, Michael Plura Asia. So with that, in sokal nga udah suya milgirel kuk development banking industry rigid. Most especially aigel kada matingek mlasesil ngani sel report li sara kumda sing FIC report lo ay saigel maklungela deposits raigal banks. The majority of the deposits are being exported out mora aigel home headquarter aigel del maklol bangkal ngarbelaw. And that to me is ako dia kal salungil al siyasing el domes ringira kuk tokora economic development lengwal loyaraw do del motobra ay krel belaw. Mansokal nga do siya magnasing ngara akora ngaraw do siya malsuma kabalment mo o mesraw daswel el kabalment amos of el provide opportunity for depositors, especially business community, to invest yegi del wal savings at tirel mora something like a government fund, for example, to raise a fund mo support a project tra government, most especially infrastructure projects. In that way, instead ra maududil mo deposit ra igal commercial banks, etamal invest ra yegi del wal government bonds, it may be a little bit higher interest or interest rate. Mang tialudo da sa el assuring na sing circulate al sila economy. So that's one question. Ong erul question nga ka ginel tukora digital economy. Ngara kukora ul deswem ginel a governmental move toward utilizing a technology. Raigirogul kora tetla transaction ra sila government ma finance especially. I'm glad you mentioned yourself lasing ingire del omesatial system el BS system ra finance el mo sabi ira ay girogul al agency ra government el access ang ngani access sa til mo ra a finance system, and to be able to understand MS aigel record nga sila finance lasing for example olbira kalulaw tigel respective chair ways and means sabi iril instead ra solicita report ra finance and sabi iril di mo ra mosoy sa system o mesek na tela revenue na sois tela spending ra government where are we at sabi iril tiril make their own assessments ra tetel or telaw do sige da one question, and I think diregulungil apo do mesra motetelelen sa el booster tial al tora digital economy, utilize tial the newly acquired in tial BSL cable that we're in the process of acquiring. Also utilize the capacity ringi the promote tora digital economy, businesses also iril technology. In that way, sabiel generate more revenue more government, and in turning more tax revenue direct mera revenue more businesses and then more tax revenue mera government direct. Direct open a baby opportunity ra wasyoba mora gegarel syoba mar gegarel adal guk familiar ay del tora technology. Akti mo mention at yagi del mo last del point nga that I will open sa ML guk sira biurgal girel tokora tial ngesora WIOA I know in ka member abor de I'm not sure na singani akora te elil guk kram na discuss ngi lo mesel impact ngi morar other tira benefit tial ngeso. Ako meserngi ultuir sel ulam rigel tia of course tia ultuir sel cares act mang a disbursement ma otabadal law do ultuir sel wal minimum wage ram rigel disel do apply ngil mera al sabal wadeng waigen dilung Laro letrer adam tamlamo small di nga rabliri em sugar telu do. Mlamo di kalsal sorry return mora yelurerir. Leng they would make a lot more money al nga lay off. El dollar telu do dra el bolorior and they gonna make a selguk minimum wage below. Makora di question nga na sa yang ani arole el sab edel gora make some adjustment el mortial I get pay out raigal al ludo so that it will be reflective or selguk qual level ram wages belaw in a way hindi rek sab el wada expanding il guk mo kaber baby adal I'm sure it patokar adal there are probably waiting for their applications to be entertained and ding angal sang selaw daw ulang mo o di kal sab il may gigidal guk benefit ay gigida ko di 4 points sual nga do siya milgire le kaman sulang
Senator Aldave ala. Kaleb Jr., can you answer all those questions now?
I will
Sulang.
attempt to. Thank you, Senator, for asking these questions. Yeah, I think the Minister of Finance needs to be more involved in what happens in our financial system for the country. And I know from several discussions I've had with IMF people that this is the way that economies are moving. Before, economies would say a bank would be too big to fail. Now we go against that thinking because even a big bank can fail and it'll affect so many more people, more countries, businesses than if it was a smaller bank. So that is something I think the Ministry of Finance needs to be more involved with, and I'm hoping to organize with the Development Bank and the Financial Institutions Commission to make sure we interact more on this topic. And I know for sure that the International Monetary Fund will give assistance to us to develop this kind of policy to make sure that Palau's economy, financial system is protected against, as you said, the major part of our banking system is with foreign banks. So we need to make sure that even though the U.S. is our friends and these banks have been in Palau for a while, that we're still protected in case anything happens to them or happens to them, their home offices in their country or other countries around us. So yeah, we do need to be mindful of our banking sector and work together to make sure that our banking sector is as strong as it can be to protect our financial system and our economy. So I do agree that we should have more banks in Palau, in particular those banks that are related to us and our trading partners. So, of course, the National Development Bank is supposed to be accepting deposits. Hopefully that's something that they can do very soon. And I am sure because of the rates they charge us for loans, that they can afford to pay us a little higher amount of return on our deposits. I think that's a very easy way to move into this area. I know that our new president advocates a new type of bank to bring more savings, more deposits into this country that could be used to fund infrastructure and other projects that we may be interested in, and maybe to offer a cheaper source of funds so that we can give to people to build their houses and borrow for things that they need. So yes, I think it's a good direction for us, and as minister, I would like to see us move in this direction where we can see better deposit rates in our banking system here, better services more targeted to our people, and that includes with businesses and of course to government as well. For instance, saving bonds. You know, our culture right now is very U.S. Oriented, so most people borrow rather than save. You know, if we can turn the attention more to saving for each household, giving them opportunities to save and to invest the money that they have, I think it would be a stronger economy here in Palau, and people would be better off. So I think I hope I'm answering your first question with that response. For digital economy, you mentioned several examples, and I think you're touching on many different aspects of the digital economy. One government program I think we need is a national payment system. This will allow local institutions like credit unions and other local banks to clear money across. So Bank of Hawaii gives a check to this small Palau bank. That bank will be able to go to clearing agency and exchange the checks, and then if they owe the other bank money, they'll give them money, or if that bank owes you money, he'll pay you, and that's done with a clearing agency. That will help our local financial institutions, not necessarily banks, but in particular we could use more credit unions. I think that's a very good way to encourage our financial sector to grow. So this is an example of that digital exchange that could be developed by using this particular law. Of course, if you're talking about digital communication, we probably need some laws that govern privacy, and as well as that support accounting for electronic signature. Make sure that there are securities in place so nobody steals your money basically, and I think we need some legislation to support that. I know from discussions with some of the U.S. banks, they are now developing parts of their online banking so that you can transfer money between people. So let's say if Senator Whips and I go to lunch, I can pay for the lunch by giving him money on my phone through my banking app, and we can go out and use the app to even split the cost among several people. That type of system, which I use already because I'm signed up outside of Palau. We can do that here, but they say that we require a law that would allow that to be them to bring that to Palau. So we can ask them to help us with bringing in that type of service that they already have, but they can't bring it here because we don't have the appropriate law. So that would be another example of something that we can do to encourage digital transactions. Of course, I know the previous government was working a lot on e-government, and that's probably a very good place to start in allowing us to transact within government and with the private sector or with individuals from government without forcing them to physically come to our offices or having meetings online. Those can be developed quite easily. Our partner Taiwan is very advanced in this area, and we can ask them to come in and help us develop the system we need to develop e-government and e-commerce in our country. Some of it deals with the banks and our ability to transmit money over the website, but I know that Bank of Hawaii, not Bank of Hawaii, PUC and PNCC already allow you to pay your bills online. So it's very convenient, and we can encourage more of that type of activity and not have to go and wipe out the ATM at the bank, as they do run out of cash. And during COVID, it's a serious issue that there's not enough cash on island, or if the ATM breaks, we cannot bring in the technician to fix the ATM. It creates additional challenges that you don't expect during normal times. So it can be something that we do now, but it can benefit us in the long term. So yes, I think e-government, e-commerce, if you've ever ordered online with Amazon or eBay, you're already practicing e-commerce. But the U.S. is not the only place that we can do business. There is what they call digital storefronts on Amazon, where you can set yourself up as a company and sell your products through Amazon or eBay. These are new technologies. I know on Facebook there are Palauans or groups of Palauans who put up sites for you to buy almost anything. Refrigerators, I've seen, even housing, real estate, they also put online. So these are other opportunities that I think we can tackle in this area of digital. WIA assistance. I've heard the president, when he was campaigning, talk about this subject. the program is subject to the rules that the United States gives us. So I understand the concern about the amounts of money that they get, but at least WIA is only applicable for Palauans, right? So at least we're the ones getting the money, not foreigners who would take that money and send it out to their country. But we're stuck with the program that they give us. It's not always possible for us to say how much we can give out or stretch it out. In our discussion today at our meeting, they were saying that the money that we've been giving is still only up to November. So there is still money available for people who have not applied that were working from February to November that can still apply. But we have to wait for their application. All of the new money that we're getting is starting from January going to March, which is the new deadline, unless President Biden changes his program. And I think one of the things holding us back is I think right now they're appointing their secretaries, their ministers. So we also have to wait for them before they can sign off on any money or any request. So we're subject to the timing of them as well. But this Department of Labor, as you know, the different departments in the U.S. all have different personalities, and Department of Labor is very strict. So it's not always easy for us to convince them to change the program just for us. But we are fortunate that we are getting this money. I think the emphasis might shift in the new government to the CROSS Act rather than to the CARES Act. And that's probably where we can make the adjustments that you're talking about that will help people move away from assistance and back into the workforce. I do know that the money that we've been given is not 600 anymore, it's 300. So the amount of money that will be given is already lower than what we were getting before. Senator, did I miss any of your questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you for answering all those questions, Mr. Udui. I'll give the floor to Senator Whips.
So lang chairing ay malitul question na promise. Actually, hindi kalsal question. There are more policy issues that also mong wangal tangat Mr. Udui mga mo minister ng Goraso akan Albolomes. Yung kato tangalin Wababi Esra Finance o MBA makumral wase gel education ringi ma experience ringi ala ulang tilt kia President Surang Whips. Hindi ngani abe bira atoko lorula government rel alta malgumral wase akmo kamingil tamo minister ng aungil apo momes. Firstly, hindi ko nombre ka confirmation hearing ra Minister Mora MPIIC Charles Obiang. Emlarngi a question that was brought up nalgukirel ultabel blals. Ay ka umsindiringi lending fees, airport space rental. Ay ka nga issue alblo losadringi sing charter flights in let move. Namra la kumbali di bus mundial sa edal collect hindi re kan lomsa dol wasit issue invoice di ngel mo collect al ngara finance edalo simlo ngara titir la collection ni ngurangan nga disconnect sa gid part tara kuktim na kabolo sa nga minister ending I know I mean anamini Obiang. I know I brought it up with former Minister Sadang. Etya issued a PPEF and issued a PPF and charter flights. Said al gotel morning discussion tiel amount delinquent PPF was around a couple 100,000. Yeah, kumesra fourth quarter report now it stands at like 1.7 million or somewhere in that range. Ya tingin la minister sa adang ara amle wana na hining ara kamamo asing mo institute ra some sort of a down payment system but the prepay
especially a PPF when they're a charter flight. They're not part of IATA. They're not regulated by ICAO. They don't get that automatic debit credit system ng government terbelas in Maudog. So adi swakal raising in morgao namini awasi ngungila doru lala el ngani expectation ergid endi kuksel domesa report tururiu le ngani wikagid ngar alsel. I mean those sort of issues akmania sin challenge endi gumral wasing ngar elela Minister of Finance will make sure sel ngani alla el issue a invoice el mora entity ng adang alat they need to pay and there's no one above the law and they excuse. So gidam ngayon was it charter companies. They'll say there was fly by night, but they're in and out. They only come for a certain amount of time. So there needs to be a regulation or a procedure in place to protect the government. Outstanding. The blood they total it's over $2 million. It's all time. Second point clothing, I think it has to do with transparency and accountability. Over the years, na observing, and I think it's an issue that the government needs to resolve through. I think it can be done by regulation. This has to do with clearing of containers, clearing adyal, malubing receiving a aircraft. Akmasaw or sale fee, el bolova customs official, biosecurity official, EQPB personnel, or it could even be public safety. Tiro oval mora ngel end user, ngel will spare cell service, be it an airline, be it a ship, be it a consignee open a container. A problem or cell process ngal adolobal mora ngal okyak. There is some. It's not a transparent process. A point nga. Agumral wasel sigum ngariya container may charge an inspection fee. Is it $50? Is it $25? Is it $100? I don't know what it is. It's a fixed fee. El importer am dangali and the arur tanggal officer el mail mala signature. Len selva alwaise akuradim na eda bebira hours. Al se medim saying ay that job is open a container ang kuradi. You know malubel tamlemes radial ling tamra port alubin skogin mlay matamara airport. You know those kind of things as el happen and the actual was saying happen. The umral was sale process needs to be more transparent. Umral was saying na sale the regulation e gut saying I get kura di mal miskal di tul issue da kango dal issue nga ge mal misaw.
Do you have anything to say, Mr. Udui?
Yes, thank you for those two questions. The first one I understand it to be about the partly about the amount of collection that that has built up, and you know the history with what my predecessor, if I'm elected, had discussed with you. I think this is not not a new problem. This is something that's existed for a while, not necessarily intentional on anybody's part, but the challenge is that you could say that the lack of an airport authority kind of creates this issue where you have multiple ministries involved in one operation, and you're generating different fees, and you're not necessarily empowered to collect the money. You're relying on someone else to collect it, which is the Ministry of Finance. So they generate an invoice or a billing, and then, you know, it goes somewhere, and nobody's really watching it. And I've heard discussion on this, where the let's say the airline company is told that they owe money, so they cut a check. It's also who's in charge of applying that money to see where that money will go. So of course, if that's my ministry, I'll make sure it comes to my invoices first, and not to the other invoices. So I think there's a need for more coordination in the process. It could be through regulation, or it could be a different approach to the process. Like you said, having an inspection fee that covers everything that needs to be done at that time, which I think makes a lot of sense. And when I was in charge of, at the time, the Bureau of Taxation and Customs, when we did work at the airport and we did the regulations for customs fee, which was twice the overtime rate, which is still used today, we still had that problem. And I think the appropriate person who the billing should be to is the airport. So the airport is the operation, and everybody should be providing services to the airport who bills the customer. That way you don't have 3 different people chasing your customer. You just have one, and they're the ones responsible for making sure that it gets paid because it's their operation. It makes the most sense. And then that could be done through regulation. We may not need to go through a law, which may create a solution that doesn't work in the future. We can just do it through regulation and solve that problem quite quickly. I think when it comes to scheduled or unscheduled flights, in doing the work that we did when we had the surge in Chinese tourist arrivals back in 2016, I think the problem became more evident. There is no tie to the fee with the person generating the fees to the people who are responsible for giving the permits. I think that's another consideration that needs to be made, probably addressed quite simply by making sure that there is a very clear regulation on how we grant landing rights and licenses, which should include what Minister Sadang had proposed, which is a deposit. If these people are not regularly scheduled, like United or China Air or Asiana, which are reputable companies, a lot of these charter flights are wet leases. They just rent the plane and throw some people on it and bring it to Palau. You don't know whether they're going to come back. At least put a deposit so we can at least cover those fees that they're supposed to pay. And I think that will help in the collection. I don't know exactly how we're going to collect on the 2 million that is owed, but we should try, and that's a lot of money. I think if they want to fly again, they should start making payments now. Build some good faith. I think that it's sort of the related issue when you're talking about transparency and accountability in clearing containers. I think some improvements can be done there as well. Same thinking as with the airport. You can do the same thinking at the port, where you organize the people who are going to be clearing cargo. Organize with the shipping company, make sure that it's more efficient, it's quicker, and for instance, a good example, you use customs, but it's not just customs who clears the container, but quarantine as well. So at the airport, when you're clearing passengers through customs, people often complain about customs, but it's usually there are quarantine people there as well. And if you notice, they change their shirts so they all look like customs officers. So when the blame comes, it goes to customs. I'm sorry, I'm a little partial to Ministry of Finance, but it's better coordination amongst the agencies, and so it can be addressed, but it's addressed in that way where it's the overall service for the customer, a customer focused, rather than the agency focus. And I think it'll address a lot of these issues. And of course, when you have access, like the OEK I'm referring to, has access to the financial system, and you can check whether our receivables are being collected or not, then we don't wait for the problem to get too big before you start asking what's going on. I think that will greatly improve transparency. And accountability, I know our president is keen on making sure we empower our people to do the job. And when you're empowered, you also are accountable for what you do, good or bad. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Udui. Is that it? Tengire abang namongil. Okay. Senator Corte.
Sulara te alle chair ala ko gera question al mora junior motal akra tol so mangaldi wana question der arlara ko to ka igagi dele kora igandi maldi wana question ra tianga related al mora sel gotel tolo lo niya senator Rizal so this time ngari akme del around maybe $230 million worth of loan, Rabelur Belo. Then, Clue and Maria Tele and Modura auditor la sell CASP because in Tilo the 28 million Girel Mo Brura sewer project Aurora Mayray and then Kadim de los sending Neko El Mora Malakal. But the question ng alikora was the last 4 years ngar olbi leng goram do niya well frenzy omlan loan. Understand there was some of them those pay. The state government, semi-government agency, everybody. Question ng is there a problem with the loan, the way we actually apply loan, and could it be improved?
Sulang kabangi, Mr. Udui.
Thank you, Senator Corte. Yeah, maybe you can say frenzy. There was a very popular trend of borrowing at that one time. It could be for any reason, may not be a frenzy in itself, but just an opportunity that everything lined up at that time, because a lot of loans, especially from Asian Development Bank, are time-based, and you have to get in the window for it to be considered and granted, and it probably just happened that way, that it lined up so all of them came at once. And that itself is a concern because capacity in Palau is limited. There's usually only one company that can do the big projects here, who can get the bonding. So, if they're doing one project, it's hard to start another project. So there are generally issues with trying to do everything at once. Not necessarily, I'm not referring specifically to getting loans at once, but trying to do too much at once. And sometimes the loans will enable you to try to do more than you can handle. So that itself could be a challenge. I think the problem is not exactly how we get loans. The problem may lie not necessarily that there is a problem, but the way we currently prioritize our projects and seek financing for them may be where the challenge lies. So if we are clear about what is our priority, which sector, transportation like the airport, or secondary roads to the states, or the sewer project, or renewable energy, solar kind of thing, I think that will help in how we approach where are we going to borrow and where we don't have to borrow. That I think is a big challenge. For CASP, it is a one-time very big loan to a company, one of our biggest companies in Palau, a government company. And that, if you remember, at that time, it was a major, major challenge for us. Getting the Kuro Irai sewer system straightened out. And it wasn't just the sewer, it was also the water system that we had to fix. It was very expensive. So, maybe the challenge also is not letting our infrastructure get too old before we try to fix it. Then you're desperate and then you borrow. Probably not the best strategy to borrow. You should borrow when when it's in your favor, so that you don't jeopardize your operations. Because, for instance, the sewer project limited us when we had a huge rise in tourism. We couldn't build any more hotel rooms. We couldn't renovate a lot of our hotel operations because we couldn't pump more sewer into our sewer system without damaging the environment and ruining our tourism for the tourists, and well as our livelihoods by dumping raw sewage into the ocean. So yes, it is a challenge in that way, but I think it's a reflection of maybe planning, and I think that's something that's also that we will be addressing in this new administration, so that it's more orderly and we can avoid arriving at the situation where it's critical and we have to react. So I think that's something that we are addressing, but it could be dealt better, not necessarily in terms of borrowing, but in terms of planning, and our consideration for how we address our capital, our infrastructure, will determine how we can finance that maintenance. Or I think when you borrow in a more orderly fashion, in a planned fashion, then you can afford to shop. And of course, that means that you should be able to get better deals. So yes, it can be cheaper in the overall amount that you need to borrow, because you didn't wait for the infrastructure to fail before you start considering fixing it, as well as you have more time to negotiate with the different financiers, for instance, PPP. It does take a while, but it's one of the cheaper ways to achieve cheaper financing source to achieve improvement to or acquisition of new infrastructure. So I guess that I'll leave you with that answer. Hopefully it's clear enough to address your concern.
Thank you, Mr. Udui. Alal mo nga, Senator Tabalwal and then Senator Agitaya.
Saule. Che, ako te mga sulime Mr. Udui gongel mora tialurior ultuira ite tukol time ka kong isi dia kalbe tultoy. Ang sulim girel che. Amal di imol griga osne mara tokora pat. Kokora orang musio seng ngil nosi subaudu. Akari wa seng wangra mo impact ngil mora agbela ara laklalo. El al time consume 120 135 ba imol tuna el current system. Ya bol Christmas sempat berapat. Yang mengarah sel impact terhadap laklal mara burden na consumer sel tira mo ultakor sel tax.
Thank you. It's a very good question. This is a concern that we have through the tax reforms. We do not want to make things worse for people, especially the people who are don't earn as much and most of whose incomes are spent on basic necessities like food or rent, things like that. So we cannot lie and say that the VAT will be good for everyone. Some people will be affected more than others, but our plan is that the overall reform, and we believe that we need to reform everything, not just the VAT. That reform will make it better for everyone. So if more is taken away from them on this side, it will be given back on this side. So this is how we plan to address that. I know in the previous public education exercises, and I wasn't quite sure why, they kept saying that the VAT is a replacement for the GRT. And I told them that I didn't agree with that. The VAT really replaces the import tax. So it's not like you're really paying more. The tax is already there. The import tax is what becomes the VAT. Everything in Palau, in our economy, is generally imported. That is what we consume. So this is where most of our money comes from. So we cannot afford to lose the import tax, but the import tax is not a modern type of tax. So we move away from it and put it to the GRT. To the GST is what the VAT will be called under what we're proposing. and that basically starts at import. So there really isn't any change because it's already what we're paying. But we make some changes to what we call the import tax. If we make it broader, we can lower the rate. So that's one way we'll give back to people. That will help with what we're calling revenue neutrality. Overall, we want people not to be affected. But because it's a better system, it'll, one, give government more money and make it easier for government to get money. And two, it will not stop businesses from growing. We need to increase the size of our economy, and that means making it easier for businesses to do what they're doing and not get in their way. Like I said, our system now is a very old system, and this is more appropriate to businesses way back when, simple businesses. Now we have more complicated business, especially hotel industry. So one of the attractiveness of that is it tends to catch things that get lost. One of the senators talked about compliance. In the chain of business, when you go from wholesaler to retailer to customer, there are many things that happens in between and something can get lost. For instance, with the hotel industry, just because they charge the rate that they're charging in Palau, you go to the hotel, you ask how much is a room, they'll give you a number. That doesn't mean that's what they're getting. It just means that's the number. So that is really a good way to catch black market evasion and things like that. The way it's structured, where you follow the value that's created, you can catch those things that you're not catching now. So because we can catch things that we're not getting now, we can increase, basically we get what we're supposed to get. That means we don't have to collect more, we can collect less. So that's where the efficiency is in the law, and once we put it in place, then we can make sure that we're collecting just what we need, not more, and that'll reduce the impact on the public. So that is, I think it's what they explained in the previous ones, but I noticed that they keep referring to GRT when they say that, and it's really the import tax that's replaced. Thank you.
Sulang Mr. Udui. Ulala Senator Aitaya.
So the chair, Mr. Udui, for two questions. Ako como magaral address at front business ng kanila all time.
Was that one question or two questions? One question, okay. I agree that front businesses are a problem. I've heard some prominent people say that it's good for Palau because at least a Palauan is getting money. But it encourages non-compliance with laws in general. So if they're going to cheat on our laws for foreign investment, why do you expect they're going to comply with every other law like taxes? So I think it's a general attitude that we're looking for in a business person, just like with the charter flights. You're looking for the right person that believes in following the rules and believes in what Palau believes in, and having a clean environment and Palauans benefit. When you let in people who would do front business, yeah, maybe one person is benefiting, but at the expense of everybody else. So we do need to address front businesses, and I think our laws are clear. I think all the agencies that are involved, labor, tax, immigration, all of us can address this problem quite easily. But in the tax reform, like I said, if we make everybody pay based on the owner, not on what the owner is doing, you can already catch a lot of these people. Of course, also the VAT, which is way to catch black market, you can also catch these people through that system as well. And then compliance. We need our people to be empowered to go out there and collect, and not have somebody call them and say, why are you bothering my business? We need to be strong enough to make sure that we're doing the right thing for everybody, not just one or two people.
As Minister of Finance, what are you going to do about it?
To support my people, give them the right tools, the new law, give them training, make it more transparent so you can see how many audits they're conducting? Because I bet you're not receiving that information now. How the audits are being structured, how many auditors we have. I know the tax office is always asking for tax auditors, but the procedure right now is you go in and you say, what is your show me your tape, right? Because every retailer is supposed to have a cash register. But if they're just pulling the thing in the back and opening up the cash register, not using the tape, then you're only counting what this guy is recording. You're not counting everything. So we need to make sure that our auditors are being very thorough and complete, checking the customs information. If we have the VAT, we should be able to track where these goods go, checking the vendors. You know, if you're a retail store, which is I think where most of the fronts are, you need to check what they bought and check what they sold to make sure that everything else jives in between. So it's a little bit more modern auditing rather than just counting ins and outs for the business that they give you, rather than what they're really doing on the side.
Okay, kamsulang.
Thank you.
Next question ali tilgi belngoda. Agar ilakada di our first order of business has been just a tax reform, a corporate registry, those pelosiga revenues in the government. Ngani ang the financial ventures that you probably have in mind that you want to get into it. I guess I'm a clear more tokora blockchain, not talbet tobra last year or year before. What is your vision or perception?
Thank you, Senator. I do believe, as Senator Aldabet was mentioning, that we need better ways of exchange. And digital is a perfect way, so we don't have to carry so much cash. Cash is like illegal man's way of transacting, right? Because it's under the radar. Anytime you can make that formal and trackable, then it's easy to catch people. So blockchain is one way of helping with the transactions. Cryptocurrency is another way. This is something that I think people are still trying to figure out. I think the main thing about currency is that it's very stable. So if you want to use cryptocurrency with blockchain technology to protect security, you still have to be concerned with the stability of that currency. The reason why most people use the US dollar is because it's very stable. If you use money from another country, it could be up, it could be down. So many countries also use the U.S. currency as a base. So their currency doesn't float up and down too much. So yes, there is opportunity there to bring in some money, but I think there are many other things that we can consider as ways of bringing in more money. They have to be looked at carefully as they come in, because right now they're just coming in on their own. I referred back to my statement on PPP. If we are interested in having a cryptocurrency, why don't we ask people to give us proposals, find the best one, and choose that and implement it, rather than just waiting for people to come and say this is good for you, and we haven't really thought about whether we want it or not. So using that one specifically as an example, I'd say we should change the way we're looking at what we're getting, and having a way to make sure that we process it safely and it's really good for us and our future. Thank you.
Senator Sangva.
Chair, Mal Saula. Mal dimre I know ang chamal important, tel ministry mal important because kaya gidi amra lomulu ra government trigid. Sel question ra Senator agit taya akum da sing there's disconnect ko ra OCC yung metal to ra airport. If I will investigate the front business, don't even get into the picture, let the bell applying business sa other belaw ma FIB is not even in the picture. So I think what we did at Bureau of Tourism, agirem before business license al issue ringi, yaso kung mga niya some suspicion ra kasi tiyang business ra atang odol bulu, ikada forwarding in my FIB before you issue a business license at Ministry of Finance. In other words, ang mengal adal may apply ringi kasi you want to leave question ra igal. So we're gonna forward your case to FIB. And until FIB out of the opinion rin kasi la check rin it's clear, then we'll issue your business license. So kung na sa sige da direct asab el tell you will help per sige the issue because in other words the FIB which investigates front business don't even get involved because in the first place yung other bela may apply a license. So if I either say Chairman Saul.
Sulang Senator sa Senator Isal.
Real question ngongit and last request. It's been almost 2 hours, and thank you for your patience, Mr. Udui. If you are indeed confirmed, I think one of the first things you're going to be tackling is the FY 2021 Unified Budget, which will expire on March 31st. Kora di olingit tulwasya if confirm obong e among tokra budget may sanga possibility. Recommend the President Gibbs Jr. Medong do government at Taiwan al saying great sub either good chance raw spell economic stimulus real based government. The past since 1999 it always has gone majority of the fund has gone to fixing roads, which is really good. Hindi madala ta stal bulul. Nganyara ng SR, Imalig, parte garar. Hindi mo niya te legal Mr. Ambassador well after election and his request makneas keringi point plan galwasing telu do ta stimulus ng girel di mo ragay luriol plalabo ngi since day one nga say no depends on your government mang agundas weng tiadagal el ngara galwasi tia girel di mo ragay lo mururael ma ngara since ka ko short funding let's say edel gugongar ka bebir tial asugum ndir ka kamit tial 11 million telang el mora bebir at toira guru of course tom skida udo mora guru marang ni Kaleb double time el guksib ela a olbil boat house masenet el guk moriang rel malduswel tabdel ay gal udo dra stimulus mora blur belawlin after all executive branch ma Senet mahaus sa di pressure o sisiul constituents. Ngot dati dagan na COVID, the blood sa ADB girela operation, you would not hurt to get a piece of this pie. And mera amatal olbin muk to spering na president. And mesa gerwol global gura igal balwat services mura adrablu. Ito spel girel mo part la availability of funds till FY 2020 Madam Rani. Sulang.
Sulang Senator Isal. Senator Ramasaw.
Sulang rate alle so besem la mo erultam ko do nding tiablal mentioner nga President Paules tiamal melut kilgirela cross act. Nakamatenge siya gim albangan ngirel almal malasmal mere adalo rol girel le meral nga timeline هذا طلعنا دوري فورست يعني تراي جيد البيبي رجيد اللي دقدي الأدرا بيلاو مر أدرا عود البلو لولسيس بر السل after دوري فورست بدأت all دقلو دنيل واسين ngara next step malubo ngara mo kukos elo malu ortir until such timing tel tokora cross acta mo tokoy ma waigel di long mlapas ra first reading kamam tel lowrol girel adi mere del time agi mo gut makla kuk urela maringi odoro clean mara house di questioner nga kal follower siya wasi kada direct kal nagalit tel stair corridor blool malokor niya President Whip salo wasi moringa te alra travel bubble di kita tel direct kal direng sa recently wasi ngaringa kuk isolated case el blal patigiringi siya amo ula di lerte ay gidel kuk motel la sa balaw do makaman sulal mla mention ay kay gidel kora mleu de swemel gidela o sa balaw do di gum nas file amo tega sometime ma me koradi mutel koradi o aisra blul wase ngarasel koraw the swim in place at tagi del sterile corridor ko mal bled excited del girel wase tel as el del motoy ngarasel ku koratara financial revenues edel mo realize ringir el arragal mo subaklia balwad ma other velo sula.
Thank you, Senator. My understanding is that we have sufficient funding to fund the Cross Act and assist people regardless of what happens. All we need is the legislation that authorizes us to implement the program. So I don't think we should be too concerned about the Cross Act, and it should be able to fund us until we're able to resolve things like the sterile corridor that President Whips is talking about and what he's been working on for the past few months. So I think, to my understanding, this is not too much of a challenge for us. I think because more of timing, the bigger challenge is the Asian Development Bank loan. This loan will be used to finance our government budget and other activities, even more than just the national government. The problem is making sure we are able to get the money on time, because ADB has their process, and we need to get in our papers or letters or whatever we need to get in by a certain time for them to start the process on their side, and then we can ask for the money. So I think that to me would be more of the concern, because we're kind of banking on that to fund most of the budget. The other money we have already, and I think there is some money that we can get quickly, just not a large amount, to fund things like the Cross Act. So I would expect that President Whips at this time, and if I'm appointed, then it would be my problem, would make sure that we have that money to cover the Cross Act, which I think is very important. Of course, WIA getting money to help people will reduce the problem, the amount of money we need for Cross Act, and that's always been the case. So that will help, and we know that we're getting that. So there's less worry about how much we need to put into the Cross Act. But yeah, we do need to pass a law before we can fund that program. And the rest, the bigger problem is making sure we get everything done on time, so the other loan is available for us to use for this year. So the general understanding for the sterile corridor is that it can bring over $10 million to our economy. So that is a big help to our budget, but it also depends how soon we can start that. That's something I think we have to work on. We have to open up our economy at some point. We cannot just keep borrowing to fund the budget. We have to open up our economy. We have to figure out how we can live in this new world where pandemics could start anytime. So we'll have to prepare ourselves to have a different kind of market, where we make sure that people coming in are just bringing in more money, not bringing in diseases that could hurt our people and our economy. So that would be a bigger challenge. But for the Cross Act, I'm thinking that's something that we can address quite quickly, and with less concern than the timing for the major money, which is from Asian Development Bank, that requires more time to process, and we need that this quarter. Yeah. Thank you.
Sulange, Mr. Udui. Senator Baulis will ask the last question. Oh, I have a last question, but he will ask the second to last. Thank you.
Kaleb ang issue ra askela udod. Eka madangil wasette nombre glolbileng amle issue mama edirek gulum da so sea gaming. Gaming will be the one of the source of money. Mang aktioger kal wase yak madangil wasen yak mogol mlamuring akora klo understanding rekal gileleng mlamu amle issue how samle pasringin meragamam Ngaral do swim la a gaming recommend rin was it's one of the good source of income, and maybe I engage mo a minister in gen SPML ngoswir olbil improve rin kada mo was yang maring la da kolekta GRT rin diakal diakal ngarbelaw kardiol di play in the on the internet ngaraw the SPML girel agi feel was saying it one of the good and close with the losiswia udo dembre e kam dengel was saying aring al belaw girela gaming ma abat chingor el all time but the albe esel toy di uspe a improvement and more participant so we can get big money out of it ngaraw the SPML girel.
Thank you, Senator. I know this has been a long argument with our country, and I think the main argument is not about the money that it brings, but more about what non-financial problems it brings, like corruption and crime. I think that's been the argument. But as you said, this is already a policy of the government that we are supporting online gaming, and we have, I believe, 2 programs, Pachinko and this new online gaming program that we have been implementing. So expansion of that, I think we've had several years of experience already on online gaming. So if it looks like it's working well and we want to expand that source temporarily or long term, then we can look at that. Of course, we have to check with the president and see what his position is on it. But because it's already a law, we could look at that as a potential funding source. Gaming outside of that, I think we run into those other issues of is it good for Palauans? Is it good for Palau? But if we're just talking about online gaming, we already have laws and we're already implementing that now. So yeah, we can look at that as an option. But I haven't been involved with or have been monitoring what's happening with the online gaming. So I'm not too familiar with it and how it's been working. Yeah, thank you.
Since Senator Sungino adil kalong ta duyak sang awla.
Test. Malungil akap singe kita koram mga simre. Lokondi ako adu le koradi observe gal adu koratralo sigra mega decision na kalu kila confirmation na ko. Mong most adu am lamatung. Ngari nga kora 8 points listel kora o sigra quality ra being a good leader. Maka mlehit ra 7 na ngari nga wan kora so kalo keringi ko. Sinsak mlongat te al. This is a confirmation hearing. Ako sel ko rin siyang koram o oversight tramal. Togora finance because it is the most important aspect tra kabinetary so selwan made ala kora it's about accountability. Kau o mutual position. You will hold yourself and your subordinates accountable mo role decisions or make. Because you will be the leader at Tokra Finance. Are you going to hold yourself accountable to your role at Rural Underco?
Yes.
Sulang.
Okay, malungil question questioner Senator Sungino. Okay, I'm gonna ask the last question. Okay. A questioner nga kora adingol da swem kora omomdas algire la negotiation ra kofat trust fund algire still financial review ra 2024 ngara omomdas yung kora amo ongil approach el angar nga role la kada reach sa il financial goals dagit ngarang umamdas weng nga role le katukura ask assistance sir al economy gidam la a shutdown in magarang albor nga kura economic recovery part del compact negotiation sige da kura questioner nga.
Thank you, Senator. If I understand your question, you're referring to any discussion on economic recovery within the compact negotiations. I'm not familiar with any of the discussions. As far as I know, they were all closed-door discussions. But I do know that our current president is very interested in seeing the U.S. being our major partner, support us through the recovery and past the recovery into growing our economy. I would expect that that's part of the negotiations. I'm not sure, is the previous negotiating team still the negotiating team for Palau, or is there a new appointment for that team, and what instructions they've been given? I'm not aware of that.
Hindi ngora nga experience ra with the compact agreement ma atetele la negotiation, because kung da siya ka mo asum mo Minister of Finance ka mo klol al nga ale material mo partra sa gidal mo negotiation team.
In my thinking, based on experience and with the original compact and how the U.S. has been treating us with the compact up till now, I believe that they will allow us to use funding from the compact for recovery. Whether they will top it off and give us additional money, I think that will be the challenge for the negotiating team to make the distinction between how much money they give us overall and then how much we can use for a particular purpose. That seems to be how they've structured the compact with us. Some of that has been negotiated, so we'll give you this, but we take away that, and others are policy-based, like the change in the trust fund being a fund that will distribute until it's gone to a perpetual fund. So these are all opportunities where we can see support for COVID relief, economic recovery, and also future economic growth.
Kamsulang we've been here 2 hours. Gimal nga sule lo sa emal metal confirmation hearing. Ma awera dong simra I'll give you muska te alal dik mo nga last al da amel close the closer tel hearing al afternoon.
Again, Madam Chairwoman and Vice Chairman, President of the Senate, Floor Leader, I was a bit surprised when I was asked by our President to serve as Finance Minister. It feels very comfortable for me because this is not where my first government job was, but where my first civil service job was. And I feel very comfortable with the ministry, and I because of my friends in the ministry and my position in the former government, I've been able to stay on top of a lot of the initiatives that have begun and have started to are now underway and now under development. So I know the direction that our new president wants to go, and I think it's what I believe and where I think we should put our attention are in line with what he's looking for. I'm also very fortunate that many of people that I work with very closely are in the Senate now, including my doctor. So it's a good opportunity for us to work together. Senator Isal, working with the compact together, we don't have to relearn things. We can just revive what we were trying to do in the beginning. A lot of the initiatives that Chief of Staff, Senator Aldabel, that we were working on, he's very familiar what I was doing, and those initiatives we can work on together to bring forward. Of course, being with the last administration, I'm aware of things that were done, like in the Marine Sanctuary and working with former Minister Sangabao. So I feel very comfortable with the job. My discussion with the president is that he really does believe in empowerment and accountability, and that's the direction I expect that the ministry will take. So I expect better performance from the ministry, or a higher level of performance, and just for the ministry. I let the other ministers handle the management of their ministries, but I will work on this ministry to make sure it performs at a very high level and achieves the needs of Palauans and our country at this time and going forward. So thank you again for this confirmation hearing and for all of these nice questions that you've given me today. For one question versus 4-5 questions, it's okay. Thank you again so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to serve Palau.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Udui, for coming today. I can only pledge my support, not the other senators. They'll speak on their own. But agi malmare nga sulem. Madingal wasay Ministry of Finance adir ka ngiluab esel accounting system. Igi tial masaudra esel tax system. Ma tial economic crisis il al time, so agim dingal waseng mal mo maring la Aurelia la Minister of Finance ma gi ngutel ti alle maring asule mal kongin appointment akum das we session president ta senate ta dilu session na next week mama mo secure nomination ka ma timlulu algirem maring asulem etel hearing ra Senate Ways and Means Committee ra resolution number 11-10 timor tagi de mam asimara sulang.